My sister is pretty slimy. Well, what do I mean by that? I caught this little snake flirting with my boyfriend. Oh, how did I figure it out? Well, they were speaking Spanish, flirting with each other, and they thought that I didn't know what they were saying. I guess my sister forgot. I love Spanish, and I learn it every second I can get, so I knew exactly what they were saying. My older sister Brianna and I grew up never knowing who our father was. Our mother never talked about him, and she made it very clear to us that she was, well, enough for both of us. She proved that statement to be true by providing all my sister and I ever needed. This was the best possible for her, as she had connections with men of power, people whom we later grew up to know she slept with. My mother passed away when my sister was in high school and I was in junior high. Her death was not an easy one on us. Oh no, it was very difficult. Though my mother never spent time finding out personal things about us, we loved her all the same. She left behind a house and some money in the bank. Neither my sister nor I was up to the legal age to handle that, so it was left to my Aunt Felicia, who is my mother's youngest sister, who never got married to date, simply became the mother which we know. She moved into the house with us, and she tried her best to make us feel less of the absence of our mom. If I were to be fair, I used to say that Aunt Felicia did better at the mother job than our actual mother. I guess it was easy for her, as she did not need to run around like our late mother, looking for money to take care of us. Our mother had left behind enough money that could see us through high school. My elder sister and I both did well in school, and I was inspired by Brianna's intelligence. She did very well in high school, and she got awarded a scholarship to a prestigious school in Europe, where she would study history and international relations. It was great, in the sense that my aunt used what was left from my college education. I soon finished high school and began college in the state where we lived. I was studying linguistics, and Aunt Felicia could still play her role in my life. I remember when my sister got the news that I was going to college. She called and gave me all the manner of advice, and all of which I appreciated, and to be honest, I never felt alone in my life all throughout those years, as my sister and Aunt Felicia were always there just looking out for me. The whole thing made me decide to not waste my life on things that did not matter. I wanted to live up to my sister's expectations when next our paths crossed. Years passed and I graduated from college. I got a job in the Human Resources Department at the airport. My aunt and I were yet to set eyes on my elder sister ever since she left home from Europe. I felt she was doing better than I was because, she was the bright one. Besides, she looked like she was doing great during the times which we video called. My aunt and I had been trying to get her to come visit us, but she always had a reason why she could not. We were happy when she called us 2 years after I'd been working to say she was relocating back to the U.S. My Aunt Felicia and I looked forward to her coming. We picked her up from the airport, and she had nothing much other than 2 pieces of luggage which contained clothing. I expected that there ought to be other properties besides 2 luggage. This was my elder sister, who always encouraged me to take my life seriously, and there had to be something more than what we were seeing. I did not jump to conclusions, as I believed it was wrong to judge a book by its cover. We soon discovered that Brianna's case was a thing of, what you see is what you get. She had nothing else besides the luggage. It was really difficult for Aunt Felicia and me to understand how Brianna, of all people, would have nothing to show for all the years that she spent overseas. We allowed her to settle down for a few days before we both decided to sit with her and chit-chat. My elder sister got emotional. She began the whole emotional thing about life not being faithful to her and all. According to her, she had done everything possible, but she could not get a stable job. My aunt and I sympathized with her. I took it upon myself to support Brianna financially. I did not want her to feel threatened or belittled by my success so far. I placed her on a certain monthly allowance, and there was times when I would go to work without my car. I left it for her to use in going about her search for a job. What are sisters for? Her efforts were in vain. None of it paid off, and Brianna soon got relaxed about getting a job, and she rather spent her time visiting friends and partying. She even invited me on several occasions to hang with her and her crew, but I turned down her invitation. I was not happy my sister was making use of her monthly allowance for just partying, but I did not want to make her feel bad by constantly reminding her that she's jobless, so I rather began reducing the allowance by a little percentage. I equally spoke with my boss about it, and he promised to be on the lookout for a job opportunity. I patiently, but anxiously, waited for a favorable reply from my boss so I could finally start saving my money, rather than giving it to my sister for partying. My boss called me 2 weeks later to inform me that there was ongoing recruitment for air hostesses. He jokingly asked if my sister was up to par. I knew what he meant by that. He was simply asking if my sister was beautiful because beauty was like an unstated requirement that an air hostess was supposed to possess. I took out my phone and showed him her picture. His eyes popped out and he said with a smirk that he would love to have some alone time with my sister. I laughed him off as if it was no news he was a womanizer who had an eye for a beautiful woman. I was super excited to inform my sister about the job opening. The pay was great, and since Brianna was someone who loved traveling, she readily accepted to take on the job. My boss's birthday was around the corner, and my department was going to be throwing a party for him at a luxurious hotel. He advised that I bring along my sister to the party, as his friend who was in charge of the recruitment would be present. He wanted my sister to unofficially meet with him so that a relationship could be formed, making things easier for my sister and it would be established. He'd already informed his friend about someone he had who would fit the role perfectly. The day of the party came and I got ready to leave the house. I discovered that my sister was not ready. She had not even had her bath. It was as though she was having cold feet about coming to the party, and I asked if all was well and she said there's no problem anywhere. I wanted to help her get ready, but she insisted that I did not get to the party late because of her. She promised to come. I left her my car keys and some money for fuel, and I ordered an Uber to come pick me up to the party venue. I get there, and everybody was looking their best. The party had gone on for about an hour when I saw my boss standing with his friend who was in charge of the recruitment process. My boss signaled for me to come and join them so he could make the introductions. I got there, and I was asked about my sister, the one for whom I was fighting so hard to secure the position for. I felt embarrassed that Brianna was yet to show up at the party because it was not a good sign. If she could show up late for the party, then it told a lot about her character, and I felt it would negatively affect the way my boss and his friend would see her. On the other hand, I knew they would be both stunned by her beauty and brilliance the moment she came, and they conversed with her. When it came to self-carriage, Brianna was someone who I trusted to carry herself well. She would not go to a place without making sure she was absolutely dressed the best. I informed my boss and his friend to exercise a bit of patience as my sister, who was on her way, was possibly held up in traffic. I was still talking with them when I saw my sister drive in with my car. I smiled a sigh of relief as I informed them for her arrival. The three of us were looking intently at the car, and I was waiting to see the jaws of my boss and his friend drop the moment my sister stepped out of the vehicle. But what they saw made me raise their eyebrows. Even I was confused. The moment my sister came out the car, we all thought we were looking at a man. And this is because she dressed like one. Brianna had cut her long blonde hair and dyed it white. She wore a pair of baggy jeans and white manly sneakers. There was no makeup on her face, not even lipstick, and I wished at that point that the ground would open up so I could just fall in. How could my sister dress like a man on a day when she was supposed to impress for the position of an air hostess? All eyes turned to Brianna, and she was looking out of place with her dress. I did not need to call her out. She easily spotted me standing next to my boss and his friend, and she walked right up towards us. I felt a fresh dose of shame running through my body as I heard people murmuring underneath their breath as Brianna came to meet us. My boss and his friend asked if the person walking towards us was the one I was talking about, and I just bowed my head in shame. I could not find the word or the zeal to make the introduction, and I did not need to. Brianna went ahead and introduced herself to my boss, who stood there looking puzzled as she reaffirmed she was in fact my sister. Both my boss and his friend could not hide their shock as Brianna was dressed like a guy. I guess they were wondering if I had told them I had a brother named Brian and not a sister named Brianna. After my sister was done with her introduction, they both smiled and tried to establish a brief conversation with her before leaving to rejoin others at the party. Brianna went on to have the fun for her life while I did my best to stay invincible. Please don't get me wrong. I was not ashamed Brianna had changed her dressing. No, I was ashamed and angry she did not dress like an aspiring air hostess. I could not wait for the party to be over before hurling my sister's drunk butt out of there. I drove home and did not say a word all the way there, and she's too drunk to understand anything I would have said anyways. I get home, and after Aunt Felicia helped me take her to her room, I questioned Aunt Felicia on why she had let my sister come to the party dressed like that. Aunt Felicia informed me that she did not set her eyes on Brianna before she left. I was boiling with anger. How could my sister ruin the chance that most people would kill to get? I waited for daybreak before pouring out my anger on my sister. Brianna was still battling with the effects of being hungover, and when I stormed her room for a reasonable excuse for last night's unexpected performance, Aunt Felicia was there to make sure things did not get out of hand. Brianna took a while before she could compose herself. She informed both of us that she was genderfluid. Well, we were surprised. She had never shown signs of this when we all lived together. Never for once did this, happen, or we see her act in a way that could suggest that her gender identity fluctuates or changes with time. This was something new, but we were careful not to judge. The anger and disappointment I felt suddenly disappeared, and I found myself trying to sympathize with my sister. Aunt Felicia asked her questions to help us figure out when my sister had made the discovery, and my sister noted that she realized it during her first year in college. She went ahead to apologize to me for the way that she'd shown up at the party. She noted she knew the party had a dress code, and a wise thing to do was dress like a lady who was fit for the position of an air hostess, but she wasn't feeling feminine that day, and that's why she turned up the way she did. My aunt and I were both supportive of my sister. Whomever she was, would now not stop us from loving her. I got to work the next day, and I did not dare to ask my boss what his friend thought about my sister getting the job because, in all honesty, I did not think she was the right person for the job. Well, this is not me hating who she is or discriminating against her. It's just the way I see it. Well, my boss and his friend saw it the same way too. I tried everything in my power to avoid the discussion, but my boss already asked that I see him in his office the moment I resumed work that day. I get to my boss's office, and he told me and letting him make a fool out of himself before his friend. I apologized for everything, but went on to tell him that my sister was gender fluid and felt the urge to express her masculinity that day. My boss did not berate her for who she was. He only informed me that his friend did not see my sister as one suited for the job. I clearly understood him. I did not bother trying to ask for a second chance because it would be of no use. There's a code of conduct for air hostesses. They have a dress code, and my sister cannot just show up at work however she liked because she wanted to express her masculine side. My boss was understanding, though, and he promised to be on the lookout for other job opportunities that would not clash with my sister's personality. I got home to meet with my sister, who was anxiously waiting to hear the outcome of the meeting with my boss. I tried being careful when telling her the outcome of things without hurting her feelings, or making it look like she was being rejected because of who she was. But I failed. Brianna flared up at my boss and society for treating, well, people like her differently. Brianna used to be the more intelligent one among the both of us, but she refused to understand the situation. Not even after I informed her about my boss's promise to be on the lookout for a job that would not clash with her personality. Neither Aunt Felicia nor I tried to push the issue further. We both knew it was a difficult time for her and she needed space. Brianna began partying harder than she did. I came home from work one day when Aunt Felicia informed me that she had not come home since the previous day she left. We were contemplating going to the police that evening when a young man by the name of Miguel brought her back home. My sister was half drunk. He worked at the bar where my sister usually frequented and they were close, and he decided to bring her back when he observed that she's too drunk to do it herself. Miguel came back the next day and the day after, and before long it turned out that I was the one he was interested in. He was bold enough to even ask me out on a date. Unlike some guys who would be threatened by my success, and he proposed to me after a while, you know. I sought my elder sister's consent just to be sure she was not interested in him, and she gave her blessing. She began giving me tips and tricks to build my relationship with my new man, since I was new to the whole dating thing. One of the things she advised me to do was to get a place of my own where Miguel and I could have some privacy without bothering my Aunt Felicia. I did so, and I asked my man to move in with me. Aunt Felicia was saddened by the fact that I had moved, but her consolation came from the fact that I was now paying attention to other aspects of my life that did not involve work. So, I began trying to talk to Miguel into getting married, and I know it's not right for a lady to force herself onto a guy, especially when it came to marriage. But, nothing was hindering us, you know. I made enough money to sustain both of us, and it's not like it was idle or so. Each time I brought up the topic, Miguel would just say, well, we should not rush things. My sister came to visit last weekend, and I left her to discuss with Miguel while I prepared lunch. I'd finished setting the table and called them to come for lunch, and I turned to leave when I heard Miguel say to Brianna, "Te comería como este almuerzo." Ay, Dios míos. I was shocked. I was struggling to understand if I've heard that correctly, because the very words translate to, "I would eat you like this lunch." I was not sure what I've heard, but my sister's response proved I was not dreaming. I froze there when I heard my sister say, "Me encantaría que." I would love that. What would your reaction be when you found out your sister, who is gender fluid, is flirting with your man? My sister was so self-centered to remember that I studied linguistics and I had a deep understanding of French and Spanish. I turned to both of them and said, "Salgan de mi casa tontos. No manches?" Well, it was safe to say they were both surprised I'd spoken English and in Spanish all of a sudden, and called them fools while demanding that they left my house. I would be going to visit Aunt Felicia so I can tell her about my sister's betrayal. Update number 1. Hey guys, so I went to visit Aunt Felicia. And well, last week I told her about the current situation of things. I got to the house and my sister was around. She probably did not have enough money on her, otherwise she would have gone partying like she normally did. I got to the house and she did not say a word to me. She just sat down at the parlor, pressing her phone while Aunt Felicia and I spoke. I told Aunt Felicia about how my elder sister was flirting with my lover right in my presence. Aunt Felicia was surprised, but before she could say anything, Brianna jumped into the matter. She tried defending herself while painting me into a bad light. She told my aunt that Miguel was initially interested in her, and that they had a deep understanding until I came into the picture. I was shocked that my sister could only defend herself by trying to make me look like a man snatcher. Although our aunt was finding it hard to believe, I still decided to explain myself. I informed our aunt that Miguel was the one who had asked me out and I had sought Brianna's consent before dating him. Even though I did not need to, My aunt was not happy with my sister, who rather than apologize was trying to play the victim. Brianna walked out on both of us, and I left the house that day feeling angrier than I had when I came. Well, 3 days after I had left the house, I received a call from our aunt. Well, turns out, from the sound of her voice, I knew there was a serious problem. I rushed down to the house and she informed me that my sister had begun making arrangements to sell the house, which, by the way, our mother had left the both of us. I was so mad. How selfish could she be? She never bothered about what fate would be of Aunt Felicia the moment she sold the house. Where did she expect a woman we had lived with us for more than half of our lives to go? Even though it would be difficult for my sister to sell the house which we co-owned without my permission, I went ahead to warn her to desist from it, otherwise I would bring the full weight of the law upon her. She has currently brought her selfish plan to a halt. Good for her. Update number 2. Something I never saw coming has finally come. I've been hurting these past few weeks from the separation and betrayal by Miguel and my sister, so I often called up my aunt to know what my sister was up to. I didn't want to be taken unaware after the house-selling saga. Aunt Felicia informed me that Brianna was trying to start up a movement called The People's Voice. It's supposed to be a movement like some others, which is geared towards the defending of folks who were part of the LGBTQ group. Their mandate or vision is to make society accept them. I was not against my sister's movement, just as I'm not against anyone who's part of it. However, my sister dragged me into the whole thing. I was on my way to work yesterday morning when my boss began calling me repeatedly. I was driving so I could not pick up, and I got to work and everyone told me my boss was upset with me. Well, I was surprised, because I had not done anything to warrant getting upset with me. I rushed straight into his office, and my boss said nothing to me the moment I got in. He just played a video on his monitor screen and demanded that I watched it. I could not believe what I saw. My sister's movement held its first podcast. And since my sister is the founder, she started with the ill treatment that she received from society. Guess who she called out for discriminating against her? Me, my boss, and his friend. She claimed I turned on her the moment she came out as genderfluid, and went as far as asking my boss to deny her a job which would have been a source of income. I was so embarrassed. My boss asked me to fix it or I would be in danger of losing my job. I explained to my boss the situation of things with my sister and apologized to him for her actions, which I made him understand was primarily just to hurt me by straining my relationship with him and making me lose my job. I promised to fix things, though I did not know how. I could not work that day, I just did not know what to do. I've not called my aunt to tell her about the recent development of things. I'll visit her on the weekend. Update number 3. I went to see my aunt 2 days ago. I began crying while telling her what my sister had done and how her stupidness had gotten my job hanging in the balance. My sister walked in while my aunt was consoling me, and she was happy seeing the tears in my eyes. She didn't say a word. She just laughed and walked off, and she knew what she had done. I would have done something horrible with my sister without a second thought if I had a weapon. My aunt wanted to confront and persuade my sister so she could publicly recant what she said, but I stopped her. It was no use, as my sister's mind is made up against me. I made up my mind to find a way to deal with the situation. After thinking about what to do, I decided the only way to handle it was to fight my sister with the same weapon she was using against me. I was going to discredit her character before the public, and it's not something I can do on my own. I just can't come to the public space and attack my sister, as it would just be her word against mine. I knew that if I planned to be successful, then it had to come from an unlikely source. I went to see Miguel. I did not visit him to apologize or make him apologize to me. No, I would not come back to him for all the money in the world. I rather offered him money to go online and say the truth about what he and my sister had done to me. I did not ask him to lie or anything. The truth was enough for me, as it would make people see the true character of my sister. If they could come to terms that she was a snake, it would negatively affect the level of importance that was attached to whatever she was going to say. I initially had my doubts as to if Miguel would accept the money I was offering, but he did not give it a second thought. He smiled, began opening up to me about the things I never knew. See, Miguel began telling me that he and my sister had connived to get me to date him. The reason why my sister encouraged me to move out of the house and get a place where I could have privacy was so that he could pressure me into having sex, get my nudes, and use them to blackmail money from me. Yeah, that was really it. I did not immediately believe him, as I felt he was simply pained that she started ignoring him after their plan did not work out. But Miguel showed me undeniable evidence. He'd be going to the studio in a few days to play his part, and my sister would soon pay for her wickedness. Update number 4. This is the final post. All is that ends well, or whatever they say. I never believed I would say this, but revenge does have a satisfying effect to it. Miguel has gone online, and my sister's movement is currently facing crisis. One that looks like it could use the movement to come crashing down. Miguel noted to the public that he and my sister had been having an affair for a while. He produced proof. He went on to say that she had become overly dependent on me, and this made her reluctant in getting a job. Especially as I placed her on a monthly allowance. Miguel spoke so convincingly that you could not doubt him. He went ahead to talk about how he and my sister had arranged to have me date him so they could get my nudes. The reason was so that I would then have, evidence, and I could be blackmailed into parting with a huge amount of my money. According to this tale, my sister decided to heap the blame on him the moment I caught them flirting with each other. She had been painting him in a bad light ever since. Miguel called to the public's notice that the podcast where my sister had called out my boss was simply a plot to get the relationship with my boss strained, and put my job in jeopardy. He said it was her way of getting back at me. The reaction from the public was expected. Most people resented my sister, while the rest still had their doubts. It was now time for me to play my final card. I went on air, but rather than support what Miguel had said, I simply apologized to whomever my sister may have offended via her actions before pleading with the public to stay away from my family. My actions portrayed me as someone who did not bear grudges and would not lift a finger at someone who had given me a blow. It made the public side with me. People began trolling my sister online. The whole thing was too much. She shut down her movement, and nobody was willing to follow a movement whose leader was a liar, a cheat, and a slanderer. My sister is now desperate in need of a job. She knows I would be the last person on earth to give her a dime. I plan on waiting for her desperation level to rise to the point where she'll be willing to sell the house. I would then call someone in real estate to evaluate the pricing of the home. I'd offer her half of the money, as it's a property co-owned by the both of us. The house would then be officially owned by me. I'm doing this because I know she would squander off the money and would get stranded really quick. Everything in my life is stable, and my job is no longer under threat. Okay, so this is what you call a wild ride of a story. I mean, we have everything from pettiness to revenge to just straight up betrayal, you name it. So the story ends with Miguel coming back and basically telling the whole internet the truth. And we know how it played out from that. The sister lost her movement and basically became depressed. What do you guys think about this story if you're OP and you find out that your boyfriend has really been cheating on you with your sister? How do you react to this? What do you do? How do you play it out? And then ultimately, when you find out, well, it's really because Miguel wasn't into you, they were just using you to get your pictures so they can blackmail you. Guys, this story literally had it all. I can't imagine being in this position, but maybe somebody out there listening has been in this position, so let me know what you would do. Thank you for joining me on today's video. I hope you have a fantastic day. Smash that subscribe button, and Mr. Redito, we'll see you in the next one.